And then she gave this sort of stunning account of when her lunch guests left her home. She said she cleaned up for a bit and then she had one piece of cake and then she had another piece of cake and then she had another piece of cake. And as she was saying it, you were going, oh my gosh, she threw up the meal. Because before this, we had no other proper explanation for why she didn't fall as sick as the rest of the other lunch guests did.
It's a tragedy what's happened.
Can you tell us about the meal that you cooked?
I'm so devastated by what's happened, by the loss of Don. Don is still in hospital, the loss of Ian and Heather.
Erin Patterson has been convicted. After more than 2 months, the blockbuster mushroom trial has finally come to an end. It was a dramatic moment in the Victorian Supreme Court, and I'm joined by our legal affairs correspondent, Ellie Dudley, to break it all down. Ellie, are you surprised?
No. Frankly, no, I'm not. From the get-go, I feel like if you spoke to anyone about this, and of course, when you're spending 2 months in a court in Victoria, I had a lot of people asking me what I thought, and sort of all throughout, the evidence just was stacked against her. The lies that she told, the disposing of the dehydrator, all of the issues with her case, I think from the get-go, it was obvious that she was going to have to mount a pretty stunning defence if she was going to get away with this.
She had a very talented lawyer in Colin Mandy SC, didn't she? He really gave it his best shot.
Oh, he really did. And there were times where I went the other way and I thought, oh, she's going to get off. He raised all kinds of doubt around, did she accidentally just pick the wrong mushrooms, things like that. So she really did have a fantastic defence team. And there were also times where I thought the prosecution weren't getting at what they needed to get at. And it wasn't really until the closing arguments that Crown Prosecutor Nanette Rogers, I thought, really drew together the case and showed that the evidence was just too much to let Erin Patterson go.
Ellie, one of my favourite things about big trials is what the jury didn't know. And what the jury didn't know in this matter is that Erin Patterson has been in jail for 2 years and was in custody throughout this trial. Where was she sleeping and how did they keep that a secret from the jury?
So she was staying in the cells beneath the courthouse during the week and then she'd be taken back to prison for the weekend. So every day she came in, she was dressed in a sort of a rotation of different blouses. She had a spotty blouse, a paisley blouse, she had a black sort of grey coloured one, a pink striped one. And so she'd get changed into that and would sit up the back of the courtroom, unless of course she was giving evidence and she was in the witness box. And then she would be transported back down to the cells if she needed to be back down there, or on the weekend she'd go back to prison. There was a mad dash every Monday and Friday of photographers because of course we wanted photos of Erin Patterson during that period. And that was the only time that you could really get her, was when she was being transported from the cells in the courthouse to the prison that she was staying in and had been staying in for 2 years. So yeah, that's where she was.
Of course, those photographs couldn't be published, and it was part of the campaign that the judge was waging, as judges always do, to make sure that Erin Patterson got a fair trial. The jury wasn't allowed to know that she was in prison, and that meant we weren't allowed to publish any of those photographs.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of media outlets got in trouble on day one of the trial for publishing photos of Erin Patterson shown in handcuffs, in prison greens, and being transported out of a prison van into the court. So that was something that the judge was not happy about. And then from then on, you might have noticed on our website, we had very tight crops around Erin Patterson's face. That's because we couldn't show that she was in handcuffs or that she was being handled by prison officers.
And of course, the reason for that is that the jury might think that she was regarded as dangerous or that the system had already found her guilty, right?
Yeah, of course. And I think that's something that stands out whenever you cover a criminal trial, is it's innocent until proven guilty. You don't want a jury sitting there thinking that this woman has done anything wrong, because at this stage, we couldn't definitively say that she had done anything wrong. And so the judge was very, very sensitive to that.
Okay, let's get into the facts of this case. Simon Patterson, Erin Patterson's husband, they are still married, but he gave evidence against her. And there was a really amazing moment early in his testimony where the judge said to him, Mr. Patterson, are you aware that you don't have to give evidence against your wife? You could feel the oxygen get get sucked out of the courtroom when that happened, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could. It's sort of the untold moment of when the trial almost tanked. We almost needed to start all over again, because if you're the spouse of an accused person, you don't have to give evidence against them. You have a right to say no. And he clearly didn't know that. And so when the judge said to him, "Hey, Simon, do you know that you don't need to give evidence?" He said, "No." Everyone in the media overflow room, which is where I was at the time, gasped, sort of grabbed each other and went, like, is this it? Are we going to have to start again? We're already, a week or so into it. And then the judge said, "Well, do you want to continue?" And he said, "Yes, I'm happy to continue." And everyone breathed a sigh of relief, and then we continued on with the trial.
That was the sense from him, that he was ready to have his say, although he managed not to seem in any way vitriolic or nasty about Erin Patterson, did he?
No, he seemed lovely. He seemed really lovely, which I think it's so challenging, right? You can't even imagine the sort of situation this man finds himself in. He's still got 2 kids with this woman. She's in prison for allegedly murdering his parents, his aunt, and attempting to murder his uncle. And yet he seemed quite joyful. He spoke quite positively about Erin 99% of the time. He spoke about how she was witty and funny and the things that initially attracted him to her when they were working at the Monash City Council together. He was quite likeable.
He also painted a picture of someone who was not very ill after this mushroom lunch, did he? That was the real import of his evidence, that on the day after the lunch, when he was rushing his parents and his aunt and uncle to hospital and being by their bedsides while they really fought for their lives, she wasn't that sick.
Yeah, and he didn't give any evidence about her being particularly unwell. He spoke about times when she said to him, "Oh yeah, I've been experiencing diarrhea since the afternoon of the lunch." But he, more strikingly, I guess, spoke about how she didn't appear to inquire after his parents or his aunt and uncle upon learning that they were seriously unwell. And that was something that I think he said was quite interesting about his conversations with Erin after the lunch.
He also painted a picture of a very sad marriage, really. They had, after this initial period of romance and love and big drives around Australia together, it had all come to a crashing halt when they were in Townsville on one of their big drives, and she decided to fly back to Perth alone, leaving him to drive back to Perth with their 3-month-old son. It was sad, wasn't it?
It was sad, and it was a marriage that was marred by brief periods of separation until they separated for good in 2015. The court was heard about that time when she flew back from Townsville to Perth to be by herself. She ended up renting a cottage that she lived in with their young son, while Simon Patterson lived in a sort of permanent home in a caravan park. They eventually moved back to Victoria together, but again, brief periods of separation until they split in 2015. But at that point, he said they split amicably. They still enjoyed each other's company. They would engage in banter over text. They'd talk about politics, current affairs, that sort of stuff, until the end of December 2022, or the end of 2022 in December, when he spoke about a tension that formed in their relationship in regards to child support after he listed himself as separated for the first time on his tax return.
Yeah, he described her being very upset about that, and then her trying to draw his parents into the negotiations about money, trying to get them to help her have Simon see reason from her point of view. And that's kind of as close as the Crown got to coming up with a motive, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that was the big question that anybody was asking around this time when the trial was happening was, well, if she did it, then why did she do it? What motive did she have to kill the relatives of her estranged husband? And you're right, Claire, that's the only thing really that the Crown pointed to that could be a motive was in December 2022. Don and Gail Patterson became involved in the marriage of Simon Patterson and Erin Patterson. Erin was frustrated with them that they weren't getting their son to see reason and see her side of the story. And she vented about that to her online friends, her friends that she made through true crime Facebook groups, who she never met in person and was only friends with online. She vented to them her frustrations about the fact that Don and Gail Patterson suggested her and Simon gather together and pray when they were having issues about, child support and finances, and, sent emojis which the Crown said were eye-rolling emojis. She referred to Simon Patterson as a deadbeat, referred to Don and Gail as a lost cause. So that tension in December 2022 was the only tension really that the Crown came up with between Erin and the Pattersons.
The next really bombshell witness was the man who lived, Ian Wilkinson, the only survivor of the mushroom lunch. On paper, he is the perfect witness for the Crown. You know, he was a minister of the church, a man of God, seemed like a lovely older man. That should have been a game changer for the Crown, shouldn't it? Did he live up, do you think, to their expectations of what he would say?
He was so joyful, and I think that the jury would have loved him. They really would have. He came in, he didn't seem bitter, he didn't seem upset. There were times where he was sitting in his chair and his chair kept sinking down in the witness box, and it was kind of humorous, and you know, he said something like, "Oh, I thought you were sending me down to the dungeon," and his chair was slowly sinking down in the witness box, and he gave quite clear evidence. He wasn't a bombshell witness, I don't think, in the way that the Crown would have expected him to be. He did give clear evidence about, for example, how he believed that the lunch guests ate off of large grey plates, while Erin Patterson ate off of a small tan-coloured plate. He gave an account of Erin Patterson being reluctant to allow the women who were present at the lunch to tour her pantry. He spoke about how she rejected help from the women when they offered to help plate up the meal. But it wasn't a clincher. It wasn't a, oh, therefore she must have done it moment. But it did give us a really clear picture of what happened at the lunch. And the first account that we've really heard from Ian Wilkinson about exactly what he recalled occurring.
Ellie, it's so great to see you in person, because we've been talking remotely for the couple of months that you've been in country Victoria in the cold for this trial. You've been stepping out of court after the big moments to record your initial impressions. It must have been helpful to try and sort of pin onto moments that were important as the trial went on.
Oh, totally. And there were quite a few of those moments, Claire, where things would happen and you would just go, oh my gosh, that's a moment. That's a thing our readers are going to, love to read about this, is this moment in this trial, whether it was something that the prosecution were clinging to or something the defence were going to cling to.
We've just heard evidence from a telecommunications expert who spoke about Erin Patterson's cell phone data and the way that it pinged off of towers in regional towns of Outram and Lock after sightings of death cap mushrooms were posted to the iNaturalist website from those areas. He used words like possible and likely. He couldn't definitively say how long Erin Patterson was in those areas, or if she specifically definitively visited the sites that the death cap mushrooms were spotted. But it's evidence that the jury will definitely be taking into account.
Like all murder trials in the modern era, there was a lot of forensic evidence in this matter. And by forensics, I mean digital forensics. So Erin Patterson's devices, her computer, tracking of her movements by her phone pinging off various towers. Did that seem at points as though it might overwhelm the jury with information?
I think it depends on which digital evidence we're talking about. So things like the messages that she exchanged with Don and Gail, or with her online friends where she was complaining about Don and Gail or talking about these financial disputes. I think that was all quite straightforward for a jury. The other evidence that I think was quite compelling and quite straightforward for a jury were searches that were made from Erin Patterson's devices to the iNaturalist online nature sharing platform, where she made searches for death cap mushrooms in May 2022, so a full year before the lunch.
Although she said she couldn't remember having done that at all.
Yeah. She said she couldn't remember having done that at all, but then her defence counsel stand up in their closing and they say, sort of ignore that she said that, like we accept that was that was her. But things like that I think would stand out in the mind of a jury. But then when we got to things like the telecommunications data evidence that was given by a telecommunications expert called Matthew Sorrell. He spoke about how Erin Patterson's device possibly visited areas where death cap mushrooms had been spotted in the weeks and months before the lunch. And I think that might have overwhelmed a jury. That was quite technical. The other thing that was quite technical was the swapping of the phones. So even I was sitting there at times being like, hold on, how many phones did she have? There was phone A, there was phone B, and then there was a couple of other phones. So at one point we had to label them phone C, and then there was a fourth phone, which I don't think we labelled phone D, but there is a fourth phone. And that,
I drew a flowchart, by the way.
Good.
If you want to check it out.
Thanks, I'll take a look. And so that was quite, I think, overwhelming for the jury at times, as it was for me. But I think towards the end, particularly in her summing up, Jeanette Rogers did a really clear job of explaining, okay, so while Police were searching Erin Patterson's home. We believe, as the Crown, that she swapped a SIM card out of this phone and into this phone, and she performed factory resets, wiping the data off of this phone, and she handed a dummy phone to police while concealing her real phone, which we still haven't recovered. So she did do a good job of summing it up at the end, but there was plenty of forensic digital evidence.
Erin Patterson's chosen to give evidence, which has come as a bit of a shock. That it's sort of the question everyone's asking throughout this trial was whether she was going to take the witness box or not, because obviously we know she doesn't have to, and if she does, she's open to cross-examination. You know, questions from the prosecution like, why did you lie about having cancer? Did you really love your lunch guests? Things like that. She started yesterday, and she started quite well, but to be expected, right? She's operating under her own defence counsel. Her defence counsel is pumping questions at her. She's had time to prepare. She's been spending, 2 years in a cell, and all she's probably thinking about is this case. So she seems like she's got some answers prepared and ready to show the jury what she knows.
Erin Patterson didn't deny having done any of that. And in fact, one thing that she tried to explain to the jury in a way that I don't think really landed was she was asked why she did a factory reset remotely of phone B, her secondary phone, after it was in the custody of police, while it was sitting in the lead homicide detective's locker at Wonthaggi police station after midnight. She said, well, I thought I'd just see if they would have been silly enough to leave it turned on, and in fact they had. I wondered if that was going to impress the jury, or if they would think, you shouldn't be trying to trick the police.
Totally. I think her tone, even the tone that you just gave us then, Claire, that I wanted to see if they were silly enough to not have put it in aeroplane mode or whatever she said. I didn't think that was particularly impressive for a jury. I don't think that a jury would have liked to have seen her, trying to trick the police or acting like she was cleverer than the police, because of course she would have known to put it into airplane mode if it was taken by the cops. So it was odd from her.
The Facebook messages, oh my gosh. So on one of the devices that was seized from Erin Patterson's home, there were a bunch of Facebook messages that were extracted from an account called Erin, which the court has previously heard belonged to Erin Patterson. And they were criticising Don and Gail Patterson and criticising Simon Patterson after Erin and Simon's marriage descended to acrimony in 2022. The user, Erin, appeared to be getting really frustrated with Don and Gail's involvement in the marriage and their level of adjudication. She got really frustrated when there were suggestions that she and Simon meet to pray about their children, about the situation. And at one point she said, I'm just so sick of this. This family, I swear to God. She appeared to be really, really fed up.
The lead detective in the case was Stephen Eppingstall, a country cop from Victoria. He was charming, wasn't he? And he charmed the jury.
Yeah, he was beautiful. He stood up the entire time he gave evidence. He didn't sit. And at one point I turned to the reporter next to me and I was like, can he sit down, the poor guy? I can't hear him properly. He's too far away from the microphone. And she said, no, it's a sign of respect. They do it out of respect. I was like, that's lovely. And I think the jury would have loved that. He also kept saying sir and ma'am. At one point, it was either the judge or Mandy pulled him up and said, you don't have to say that after every answer. And he goes, sorry, sir. It was lovely. It was really lovely. And I think that he would have been quite convincing to a jury or quite a solid witness to a jury, because he's not got nothing to gain through any of this other than he's done diligent detective work to try and, prove if a crime occurred.
Late in the trial, Erin Patterson surprised everyone by giving evidence. This is something she did not have to do. And it was something in discussion while the jury was out throughout the trial. Colin Mandy had played very close to his chest. At one point, he was directly asked by the judge, is your client going to give evidence? And he said, I don't want to answer that question, which put us all on the edge of our seats, didn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely did. I said earlier that the one question I was asked throughout the trial was, well, what's the motive? The other question is Erin Patterson going to give evidence? Because you're right, she doesn't have to. And a lot of people would be advised against it, right? Because if you are going to give evidence to give your side of the story, you're open to cross-examination. The prosecutor can come through and ask you everything. Nanette Rogers came through and asked her all about why she lied about having cancer, asked her about her relationships with these people, asked her about her religion, her weight, all of these things. But she did. She was called to give evidence. There were gasps amongst the media overflow room, because I don't think anybody really expected that she was going to do it.
Yeah, there's a reason why most accused don't give evidence, and that's that you will be cross-examined by the Crown. So the pressure was on Nanette Rogers to deliver a good cross-examination. In her evidence, Erin Patterson came up with 2 new explanations that the jury had not heard before. The first was that she was suffering from bulimia and had vomited after the lunch. This was never quite linked directly by her, but it was implied as an explanation for why she didn't suffer death cap mushroom poisoning.
Yeah. She never used the word bulimia, but she just went so close to it. She spoke about binge eating. In days in the lead up to it, we had heard about her self-esteem issues. We had heard about diet books she had purchased, and we were all sitting there thinking, where's this going? Why do we need to care that this woman had low self-esteem? And then it came that she said that she had issues with binge eating. She spoke about how when she was a kid, her mum weighed her. And then she gave this sort of stunning account of when her lunch guests left her home. She said she cleaned up for a bit, and then she had one piece of cake, and then she had another piece of cake, and then she had another piece of cake. And as she was saying it, you were going, oh my gosh, she threw up the meal. Because before this, we had no other proper explanation for why she didn't fall as sick as the rest of the other lunch guests did. But all of a sudden there was this moment of clarity of, oh, she threw up the meal. But even that was, under cross-examination, Dr. Rogers said to her, is it your case that you threw up the beef Wellington? That, she spoke about eating all the cake and then making herself vomit. And she said, I don't know, it was vomit. How could I know what was in there? Unless you can see a bean or a piece of potato, how do you know what you actually vomited up?
I thought that was a missed opportunity by Nanette Rogers to really grill her on why she hadn't said to anyone at the hospital, her children, her husband, that she had thrown up after this lunch.
Oh, you'd think so, right? And there was, the defence put forward this sort of idea that she was very ashamed of her weight, that she was sort of this sad, overweight, middle-aged woman. And so I guess the explanation would be, oh, well, I was ashamed and, binge eating and eating disorders are such humiliating things that I didn't want to tell anybody about it. But when 4 of your lunch guests are dying, surely at that stage you say, oh yeah, I made myself vomit. Even if you say, I vomited, it's really bizarre.
Shame was central to the other part of her explanation. And this is her explanation for why Don and Gail Patterson thought that she had cancer. In text messages tendered to the jury, she had hinted to Gail Patterson that she had a very serious medical issue, that she needed them to come over to the house and discuss so that the children wouldn't be there, that she wanted to have an adult's conversation about it. Ian Wilkinson said that at the lunch, she told them she had ovarian cancer. She denied that she ever said specifically that she had cancer. But her story was that she did have surgery coming up. She was going to need help looking after the children, but it wasn't cancer surgery, it was a gastric band.
She said she was sort of fumbling on the details. She was like, oh, I think it's called a gastric bypass. She said that she had booked in a pre-assessment consultation with a clinic called the Enrich Clinic in Melbourne.
Which turned out to be a dermatologist.
Yeah, which turned out a dermatologist and, perhaps maybe offered liposuction, but doesn't offer liposuction anymore, but did at the time that she booked her appointment. So it was all kind of confusing evidence there. But that was also, that was another shock, right? It was the explanation that she put up for why she lied about needing treatment for ovarian cancer. And the other part of that was her explanation that she just really appreciated the love that she had received from Don and Gail when she had told them that she was getting these medical tests. She said that she appreciated the attention that she got from them, and she wanted to get more of that from them. So a couple of interesting explanations from Erin.
Police say you're a suspect. Do you have anything to say about
Yes,
that?
I say I didn't do anything. I love them. And I'm devastated that they're gone. And I hope with every fibre of my being that Don pulls through.
Well, the trial's over, Ellie, and next will be sentencing. Erin Patterson's been convicted. These are serious offences. She'll face a long custodial sentence. She'll perhaps never see daylight again. And the sentencing hearing itself will be fascinating, won't it?
Yeah, it will. We'll be getting witness impact statements from all of the people who have been impacted by Erin Patterson's crimes. It'll be terribly sad, I'm sure. But yeah, she's going away for a long time.